Hi, today we're going to be looking at midpoints on the coordinate plane. There are two different kinds of problems we're going to look at. The first problem is just straight how to find a midpoint on the coordinate plane. So if we were going to find the midpoint of this segment with endpoints at -5, 6 and 8, -2, might help if we could visualize about where we think the middle of that segment is going to be. Now, in terms of a formula or way to remember, a midpoint formula is really just taking the average of the x's and the average of the y's to create a new point. Sometimes it's difficult to remember how to take an average, but what we're really doing is looking at adding the two x's together, dividing by 2, and then adding the two y's together and dividing by 2. So using this formula, this is probably how you would see a formula in a textbook or how it'd be given to you. I like to break up this formula into two different parts. The first part, we'll just focus on the x's. To get the x coordinate, you add the x's, divide by 2. The second part is just focusing on the y's. To get the y coordinate, you add the y's, then divide by 2. I like this because it just keeps our work a little bit more organized. So just focusing in on the x's, we need to figure out which are our x1s and our x2. So we're really just going to focus in on those x's and then just substitute our values. So instead of x1, we'll put -5. Instead of x2, we'll put 8. At this point, -5 plus 8 is 3, so the x coordinate would be 3/2. What I'd like for you to do now is try this with your y coordinate. Let's check your answer. So for the y coordinate, I got 2. In order to answer our question, we have to put them back together. The midpoint would be at 3/2, 2. And at 3/2, 2, so 3/2 is about 1.5, 2. I would expect the midpoint to be right around there. Now, the next type of problem that we're going to be looking at is what happens when they give you an endpoint and the midpoint, and they want you to find the other endpoint of the segment. So again, here is our picture. We need to imagine that there is going to be a line segment where M is the middle. So I'm going to use that separated formula, just focusing in on the x's. But we need to be careful. My x1 is 3, but what we're looking for is the other x coordinate, the other x2. The 6 that they're giving us is actually the midpoint, or it's coming from the midpoint. So we need to solve this particular equation. The first thing I would do for this problem is multiply both sides by 2. I would get 12 equals 3 plus x2. After you subtract 3 from both sides, we get that x2 is 9. What I would like for you to do, now that we know that our x2 is 9, I want you to focus on finding the y coordinate. So just with our substitution, you should have -3 is 1 plus y over, negative 3 equals 1 plus y2 over 2. And when you solve, we get y2 is negative 7. So our answer, where is the other endpoint? The other endpoint is at 9, negative 7. So we would expect B to be somewhere there. So those are the two different types of midpoint problems that you're most likely going to come across. So now would be a good time to do some extra practice.